Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome to the fourth installment of the 5-part special on Sant Jarnail Singh Khalsa. In previous parts to this special, we've seen how Santaji grew up as a child, the moral, social, political, religious values that they had as a child and as a young man, and the way they brought those to the fore as a Saint General of Dum. We've talked about how they gave voice to a string of political, economic, social and religious problems that normal poor people were facing in Punjab at the time, not just Sikhs but many other people, and how they became a voice for the voiceless. But to suppress that voice, the Indian establishment, rather than talk to Santaji like in a humanitarian type of way, in a diplomatic way, because they were seen as the world's third largest democracy, instead they used tanks and jet bombers and mobilized their whole army to suppress that one voice. And under the guise of getting Santaji, they actually used Santaji as a symbol to attack a whole faith. And then we discussed in Operation Bluestar how Santaji fought back bravely, restored our honour, showed us how we are as formidable as our forefathers like Baba Deep Singh Ji. But the thing is, Santaji, the way they lived their life was so powerful that even 30 odd years later, we are still so inspired. There's so many Sikh people out there across the world who are so inspired by his words, the very picture of him. But whenever, throughout our history, throughout our human history, world history, whenever a corrupt or degenerate society has existed, or a corrupt and degenerate establishment has existed, any political, social or moral revivalism has always been seen with much contempt, and the establishment at the time would do anything to destroy that. So Santaji was exactly that. He was that political, social and religious revival. He was the person who was pointing out everything that was bad in Indian society. Now, we may think that this just existed in the 1980s, but like I've said, this has existed since the world started. Whenever somebody has tried to highlight something corrupt or bad or evil or unjust, the powers that be will always paint that person as a criminal, as somebody who is a traitor, and will do anything to subjugate them and the people that listen to what they are saying. Now, we can even see this way back in 1469 when Guru Nanak Dev Ji was born. Even at that time, we know Guru Nanak Dev Ji was the king of kings. Yet Babur was somebody who said that Guru Nanak Dev Ji is a traitor, is somebody who's corrupt, is a criminal, and said that he's an enemy of the state. Guru Arjan Dev Ji, he was given the same type of status. He's an enemy of the Mughal state, simply because they did not toe the line of the Mughal regime. Santaji, taking inspiration from our gurus, didn't toe the line of the Indian establishment, and so they had to face the consequences. People around them were getting hurt, yet they still stood firm like a rock. But the Indian establishment are so afraid that we, as a nation, are going to be so inspired by Santaji, even to this very day, that for the past 30 odd years, even while Santaji was around, so many misconceptions, so many myths, so many blatant lies were told about Santaji. And the purpose was that we never get inspired by his words, that we doubt his very character. But the way he lived his life and what he stood for, if the truth is told to everybody, then it would rock the Indian establishment at its knees. And so this episode is going to discuss some of those myths, and we're going to try and dispel a lot of the misconceptions. Now, there's reams and reams of information out there. This episode could be 10 hours long because Santaji's life was that amazing. But we're going to try somehow and just give you some of the bite-sized chunks, so you, as we would implore you, to go and do some of your own research. So we're going to go into one of the more popular myths that are spread out there, that Santaji was anti-Hindu. The government were very successful at the time during the 70s and 80s in trying to make the battle for human and civil rights movement seem as a communal thing, something that separated Sikhs from the rest of the country. And this was propagated by the media. At this point, the media, they were working hand in glove with the government. Anything the government fed them, they printed. Whereas the voice of Santaji was always misconstrued, and we never had any media at that time. Now, this whole thing about Hindus, we don't even need to look into books for a response to this anti-Hindu myth, we can look into Sant Ji's speeches themselves. And many times Sant Ji would emphasize how amazing the Sikh religion is, that we welcome everybody with open arms. We're an equal religion. We treat everybody with pure respect and love. And so we can never, if we do have some kind of hatred for any other religion, be it Hindus or Muslims or Christians, then we by definition aren't Sikh. Now, Sant Ji often helped many people, and those weren't even Sikhs. People come from all different kinds of areas, and a lot of them would be Hindus. They helped out Hindu girls who were suffering from the hands of their in-laws because they couldn't meet the dowry requirements. They helped out Hindu shopkeepers. Even when one of their close associates, Bhai Singh Ji and Baba Tara Singh Ji, were arrested on false charges, in that prison, Baba Amrik Singh Ji and Baba Tara Singh Ji built a mandir for the Hindu inmates in that prison. So Sant Ji was very, very in tune with Sikhi, that everybody should be treated equally. And I'm just going to read a little bit from one of Sant Ji's speeches at the time. They say, "Who was Jayadev? Wasn't he a Hindu from amongst you? He was a Brahmin. Jayadev is sitting here in Guru Granth Sahib. If a son of a Sikh has made obscenence here, he has done so at the feet of Jayadev, the Brahmin." But at the same time, Sant Ji was still astute enough, sharp enough and brave enough to say that we are actually still being treated differently to the rest of the country. And they did know that although we've done so much for the Hindu community, we haven't seen that kind of respect back. And this is another extract from one of Sant Ji's speeches. They say, "The one who got the fifth king tortured on the hot plate was from among them meaning the Hindus. The one who administrated poison to the sixth king was from them. The one responsible for the martyrdom of the Sahibzade was from among them. For the sake of all of them, for the sake of their Janehu and Tilak, the ninth king gave his head, and now these people have had the books published claiming that Guru Tegh Bahadur Sahib Ji gave his head for some personal feuds, and he did not serve the Hindus. What can we expect from the nation, the people, into whom such ingratitude has crept in?" So, although Sant Ji would say that we are all equal, we treat everybody equally, they were as sharp enough to say that, look, we are being treated differently, and the people who we have sacrificed so much for, they don't have that gratitude back. And in turn, rather than be grateful for what we have done throughout history, they're actually working against us. And many times, Sant Ji, even in their speeches, would emphasize the Hindu-Sikh by that Hindus and Sikhs, they're brothers, and emphasize unity. But a lot of the time, what Sant Ji and the rest of the Sikhs in Punjab received back from many fascist Hindu groups was Hindu, that Hindu and Hindu are brothers, not Hindu and Sikh. Sant Ji also often used to say in their speeches, quite rightly, that has ever a Hindu gone to prison for protecting his faith? Has a Hindu ever gone to prison for trying to get his language, Hindi, recognized in any state? Has a Hindu ever gone to prison for wanting his holy status recognized in the Indian government, in the Indian constitution? Has a Hindu ever gone to prison for talking about civil and human rights? Has a Hindu ever gone to prison for protesting at the burning of his holy scriptures? The answer was no. But when we want to highlight our issues and raise our voice about so many brutal things that are happening to us, then we have to go to prison in hundreds of thousands. We have to face police torture. We have to face fake encounters with the police. Why is there this discrimination? So Sant Ji highlighted a lot of things, and they were all about unity and community. But if that same community isn't showing any unity, then what do you do in that phase? They still stood for poor people, but the response they got back from the majority was that you are a terrorist and you are a criminal. And all of these things were baseless. Other popular slogans that were raised in Punjab, in Amritsar in particular at the time, by fascist Hindu organizations were things like Kach Kara Karpan Inu Pejo Pakistan. That the articles of faith of the Sikhs, like the 5Ks, that they should be sent to Pakistan. They shouldn't be allowed to exist in India. Another one was Duki Tikki Rani Deni Sette Pagri Rani Deni. that we're not going to let second or third people, minorities stay in India. We won't let them exist. And we won't let the turbans of the Sikh stay on their head. These were slogans that were bandied around day in, day out as part of normal life in Punjab. Did Sant ever raise any kind of slogan in any speech that they ever done about something that was anti-Hindu or anything? These guys even went to the trouble of making it rhyme. But Sant never ever went down that road. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, who are the real separatists? Who are the real communalists? And who are the real terrorists? And who is the real threat? And if you're in some doubt that this existed, do your own research. You can see the kind of papers that were written at the time, the things that were said, Sant speeches. But even if then, that you don't believe it, look at just a couple of months back when the protests were going on for Bhai Rajoana, and many people were protesting where Bhai Jaspal Singh was made shaheed. If you look at the YouTube videos, you can see people like Bhai Jaspal Singh and the rest of the Sikhs sitting down, doing Naam Simran, and they're reciting Gurbani, even though they're being there's a lot of provocation going on just to kind of get a reaction out of them. But then you've got the fascist Hindu Shiv Sena shouting these very slogans almost 30 years later, that we're not going to let the turbans of the Sikhs down their head, that we're going to send their 5Ks to Pakistan, that they can't live in India. The same slogans that were bandied around over 30 years ago were being used only 2 months ago, and you can see this on YouTube. So you can see what Sant was up against, and even in the face of such fascism and racism from almost 83% of the population, Sant still remained reserved. He still attempted to keep unity. He still wanted to maintain peace in Punjab. So this myth about being anti-Hindu is completely baseless and is completely anti anything that Sant stood for. If anything, all Sant said was, it doesn't matter who the person is. They could be from within our own community. If they're doing something wrong, then they need to be highlighted. It doesn't matter who they are. Another popular urban myth that's often talked about Sant is that they often initiated violence or were involved in criminal activity. Now, Sant, if you look at the information from the 80s, they actually looked at stuff from a very legal perspective. Their solution was never violence. They never initiated anything. But in fact, I would actually argue, looking and researching into the life of Sant and the things that were going on, they were the victims of police brutality. They were the victims of violence. They were the victims of terrorism. Now, there's many things that happened, and I'll just point out a few things. Sant became the Sant Jarnail Singh in 1977. By 1978, literally a year later, Sant had witnessed a massacre of 13 Sikhs at the hands of the devilish group called the Nirankaris, who were state-sponsored to insult Sikhism. Now, in that very city in Amritsar, they were defaming the Gurus and our history. They were defaming everything. And Sant had to listen to this stuff. Then they had to see 13 Sikhs get massacred innocently by the police. All they asked for afterwards was for a judicial inquiry into the matter. What they saw was the guy who organised it and executed those Sikhs was given a safe passage out of Punjab and was acquitted with no charge. Sant, anybody, even I would lose faith in that kind of system. You would lose faith in that kind of system. Maybe you would turn to other means to get retribution. But Sant still tried to have faith in India's judicial system. But what the Indian establishment done to Sant was step up their terrorism on Sant. Now, for instance, Sant was charged with falsely, because they were acquitted straight after, falsely charged with murder of a popular journalist. Now, when they went to arrest Sant in Haryana, in Chandokana, Sant had already left that place. They were doing some sermons, some religious preaching, but they left there 2 buses which contained so many manuscripts of Sikhi, Gotke Sahibs, so many scriptures that, you would respect highly. What the police done was to provoke Sant, they've set fire to those 2 buses. Complete sacrilege of our scriptures. Sant comes to learn of this, and they push for a judicial inquiry into that matter as well. They don't start killing people, they don't start shooting people, they start highlighting in their speeches that look what they are doing to our very scriptures. If I'm their target, why did the police burn those scriptures? Then, a week later, Sant, seeing all this brutality inflicted upon the people and the scriptures being burnt, offers himself up for arrest in Chowk Mehta, 20th September 1981. He offers himself up for arrest and he's taken away. But the DGP of police at the time, the General of Punjab Police at the time, was a close associate of the Nirankaris, the people who were involved or organised the killing of 13 Sikhs in 1978. And he wanted a good slaughter of Sikhs. So what he done was, he killed 18 Sikhs when some of them tried to protest against Sant being arrested. 18 Sikhs were killed. After that, Sant is released from prison and he asks for another judicial inquiry into that, and nothing happens. Sant closest associate, Amrik Singh and Baba Thara Singh, they were arrested on false charges as well. Sant went to the extent of approaching the district magistrate of that state and found that they were completely powerless. They sought legal redress from people, they approached barristers and solicitors, they knocked on every door, but what they found was the courts were powerless, and in fact, when they were successful in releasing some people, they were re-arrested on flimsy charges. And the media at the time, rather than focus on Sant speeches when they were talking about police brutality and fake encounters, arresting people on flimsy charges, they just focused on the fact that Sant is preaching hate. But what kind of hate was this, when all they were saying was, why are we being treated so differently from the rest of India? Why are Sikhs being picked up, locked up and tortured? Why is this happening to nobody else in India? This is the one thing they were highlighting. So how can we actually say that Sant was initiating violence when they were the victims of so many heinous crimes against them, so much provocation to try and get some kind of reaction from Sant? But what did happen during the 80s, Sant would highlight certain people, DSPs, SSPs, certain advocates, people who were known butchers of innocent Sikh people, Punjabi people. All Sant would do as a brave Saint General, as a brave Sant, not like the kind of Babi we've got today who close their ears and eyes and all they do is eat longer and travel the world. He'd stand on stage and bravely say, this person, this police officer, this high-ranking police officer, this army official has done such and such a thing. And what they found in Punjab was often those people would be brought to justice. Maybe their lives would be ended. But it wasn't Sant who killed them. Sant was merely highlighting the fact that these brutalities are taking place. The courts aren't doing anything about it. Even our scriptures and our gurus tell us when all peaceful means fail, and the organizations that are supposed to supply those peaceful means, if those fail, then you're rightful to pick up the sword of justice. Now, many times when these police officers were brought to justice, it wasn't by Sant. Often it was by the survivors of those family members who were killed. Relatives who had nothing left because the police were treating them so badly. All they had from Sant were words of motivation, an inclination about what their heroes in their history would have done, people like Baba Deep Singh Ji, and they went and done exactly the same. What the media done was blame everything on Sant. And Sant even says in one of his speeches that if a cat or a dog dies in Punjab, they say Bhindranwale had it done. This was a massive tirade to destroy this man's name. But what people were asking at the time was, if the people who are supposed to protect us, i.e. the politicians, the police, the army, if they are working against us, then what other choice do we have? I mean, even to the extent that India Today, one of the leading magazines in India, on their issue December the 31st, 1981, they reported that a senior officer of Chandigarh, reported that it's so shocking that we have so little against Sant Bhindranwale, yet we blame him for everything. This is a confession in India Today magazine. And the even more shocking thing is that the things preceding Operation Bluestar, while people, the army units were practicing on a mock replica of Harmandir Sahib in 83, they were doing this, yet there was no crime No, nothing had been committed by Santaji that was illegal. But the only thing that they could level against Santaji was that his speeches were objectionable. And for this, they had to practice on a model of Sri Harmandir Sahib. So we can already get a flavour of the kind of myths and the kind of misconceptions and downright lies that were spread about Santaji. And the worst thing is that many of our own parents to this very day believe those kind of lies. Now, I was, maybe 3 years old when 84 happened. Just a little bit of research has told me what the actual truth was. So we shouldn't believe everything we hear. Do your own research. And when you do start doing your own research, you realise that in Punjab, while Santaji was leading the movement, crime rate was down. Living standards were up. People wanted better things in their life. They had an elevated way of thinking. They shunned the drugs. They shunned the intoxicants. They started going towards the path of Gursikhi, becoming better human beings, fighting for others, wanting better things in life. That was actually Santaji's biggest crime. That was the biggest crime, is that people were turning towards Sikhi. This simple rustic preacher in Punjab was bringing Sikhi back to life. That was his true crime. That is why he was being terrorized. But instead of doing what many other Sikh leaders had done for the past 30, 40, 50 years since the independence of India, which was to close their eyes and pretend that everything was okay and that we will somehow survive and manage in India despite the tirade against us, Santaji decided that enough was enough, that we had to stand up. And they often said this one very, very poignant thing, that if we highlight many culprits that have killed innocent people, tortured innocent people, raped innocent girls, gone into Gurdwara and burned copies of Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj, we've highlighted all these culprits. All we say to you is one thing. If out of the culprits that we have highlighted, you give them even 1 day sentence, then we will believe in your judicial system. The problem is that the Indian establishment couldn't even put these people behind bars even for the 1 day. Had they treated Santaji like a human being, had they treated the Sikh faith like the faith that it was a faith of love and humanity and respect, rather than look at it as something that would somehow bring about the disintegration of India, maybe the story would have been completely different. Another popular myth that's often bandied around is that Santaji was a pro-Khalistani, anti-Indian and a separatist, whereas in reality this couldn't be further from the truth. Santaji's agitations and Santaji's the things that they were involved in often centered around just bringing some normality back into people's lives. It wasn't about separating Punjab from the rest of India. Santaji often used to say, when our brothers have sacrificed so much, people like Bhagat Singh and Udham Singh, Kartar Singh Sarabha, when they've sacrificed so much for this nation, why would we be so quick to fragment it? They said that in many speeches. They also said that if the centre hands us Khalistan on a plate, then we won't make the mistakes of 1947. We will take it, we will welcome it with open arms. But for now, we are not struggling for it. They also maintained many, many times that if the Indian establishment treat us as brothers and treat us the same as the rest of the majority Hindus, then we are more than willing to stay here in the one house. But if you continue to push us to the wall where we've got nowhere else to go, then we will have to reconsider our strategy. And then they gave that warning. And we all know what that warning was. That the day you come into Harmandir Sahib with your helmets and your boots and with all your artillery to attack Sri Harmandir Sahib, then you yourselves would have laid the foundation of Khalistan. That day there will be no turning back. So Santaji wasn't a separatist. Listen to his speeches, read about his life. The day the Indian army invaded was the day Khalistan was formed. That's how much time Santaji gave to the Indian government. Yet they were hell-bent on destroying our psyche. Khalistan was laid in 84. To conclude, there's many, many myths out there that we'd like to cover and debunk and destroy, many misconceptions that we'd like to cover. there's even more information out there that justifies what Sant Ji done and proves how much of an amazing Saint General they actually were. And that's why I do urge everybody to start reading up on the life of Sant Ji and ask yourselves this: why is there such a tirade against the very man's name? What is it about that man that they are so scared of? Why don't they want his message to reach you today? That's the question I would like you to answer yourself. And just to finish off, I'd just like to quote Veer Sukhan, Veer Jinda in one of their letters, where they say, "When nations wake up, even history begins to shiver." Sant Ji, they done exactly what Guru Gobind Singh Ji Maharaj would want them to have done. They awoke a nation, and the Indian establishment began to shiver. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.